Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. I apologize if my voice gets a little scratchy. I'm getting over a cold, but I've got the strength to talk about this weekend's box office. And some weeks I sit here and I prep the show and I think we're on our way back. And there's other weeks where I'm prepping the show and I look at the numbers and I imagine that it's kind of like being a Zeppelin enthusiast. Like not just a guy that loves Zeppelins, but like a guy who's devoted his life to Zeppelin travel. And I'm watching the Hindenburg crash, except the Hindenburg crash takes over 5 years. This was one of those weekends. So let's jump into it and look at what there was of the box office. And we will start with the box office top 10. At number 1, after some adjustments over the weekend when the final numbers came in, was Novocaine with a debut of just over $8.8 million. That's one of the lowest number 1 grossing movies in a very long time and well below where people thought that it was going to open. It was thought to be at least low double digits. Black Bag was in second place, another new film at $7.6 million. Last week's champ, Mickey 17, dropped almost 61% for $7.4 million in its second week for a $33.2 million total. That's a comic book movie drop, which is not necessarily what you want in a movie like Mickey 17. Speaking of comic book movies, Captain America Brave New World in its fifth week dropped 32.1%. It made another $5.6 million. Its domestic total now is at $185.6 million. In fifth place, another new film, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, which only made $3.1 million, combined with Max pulling a lot of the classic Looney Tunes cartoons off their streaming service this past weekend. It feels like a very dire time for the Looney Tunes. In sixth place was The Last Supper, which debuted with $2.7 million. Paddington in Peru came in seventh at $2.6 million. Its domestic total now at $41.2 million. Dogman stayed in the top 10 for a seventh week, a 25.1% drop for a $2.5 million weekend. Its domestic total now at $92.8 million. The Monkey spends another week in the top 10 with a $2.4 million weekend gross and a total gross so far of $35.2 million. And Last Breath in its second weekend just barely stays at number 10 with $2.2 million. Its domestic total now $18.5 million. The new film from A24, Opus, which was also in wide release, opened outside of the top 10. Dropping out of the top 10 this past week, we had Mufasa the Lion King after 12 weeks. I mentioned last week that makes it the longest reign in the top 10 of any movie released in 2024. Anora is out of the top 10 after 1 week in its second top 10 appearance. Rule Breakers and In the Lost Lands also out of the top 10 after just 1 week. When we look at the biggest theater count changes for the past weekend, Anora lost the most. It was a very short-lived expansion. It lost 876 theaters. It's now in 1,062. Night of the Zoopocalypse lost 850 theaters. It remains in 550. One of Them Days finally lost the bulk of its theaters. It lost 786 of them, 325 theaters remaining, although that movie had a very impressive run, which we can't really say about many movies this year. The Unbreakable Boy lost 740 theaters. It's still in 458. And Riff Raff lost 701 theaters. It's now in just 133. And let's look at what I maybe optimistically called several years ago the road to recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the post-pandemic average of 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is the weekend box office for this year. And you can see that for a second consecutive week, we're not only behind where we were pre-pandemic, we are well below where we have been the last few years, in a year where studios and theater owners and everybody else, where they were hoping for economic recovery, we are not seeing it thus far. We were pacing ahead for a little bit, but now we are somewhat behind. We'll see when we get to the end of the month if we have been able to make up that deficit, although keep in mind that last year there were a lot of blockbusters that did do decently well in theaters in March. So my guess is by the end of March, we're going to be behind the pace for 2024. And there's really no way to sugarcoat it. This was a really bad weekend at the box office. Just about every new film underperformed expectations. Mickey 17 showed absolutely no staying power. You can't say that there was a lack of new product because we had an R-rated action film, we had a family cartoon, we had a drama from Steven Soderbergh, all in wide release, and yet none of them really connected with an audience at all. And I think that what we've seen so far in 2025 is that audiences are willing to give the most mediocrely reviewed sequel to a previous film or attachment to some kind of something that they know know much more of a shot than they are something that is original, something like Novocaine, something like Black Bag, neither of which really opened that well. We are seeing more and more that audiences will go to see the larger films, the franchise films, and thus far they're all but ignoring the original films that studios are putting out there. And you can't say this week that it was a quality problem. Novocaine, Black Bag, Looney Tunes, they all had strong critical reviews, and yet the audience just didn't show up. And to put things in a little bit more perspective, we just passed the 5-year anniversary of the last box office weekend before the theaters closed down. Really, theaters were beginning to close down that weekend. And let's look at the comparative total domestic box office for those two weekends 5 years apart. So if we go back 5 years to March 13th through 15th, 2020, the weekend before COVID shut down everything, some theaters are already beginning to close. Many people were already starting to stay home. The total domestic box office stood at $53.5 million. The total domestic box office for this past weekend, 5 years later, $51.5 million. $51.5 million. That's right. The box office made less this past weekend than it did 5 years ago as things were shutting down for COVID. That's just not a great thing psychologically to get 5 years later and have that number be lower. Of course, there have been seismic changes in the industry, the emergence even more so of streaming and people not going to theaters, people watching things at home, ticket prices going high, the economy changing. It's not like it's the exact same marketplace, but still, we have for the first time in a while I'm not going to say thriving, but certainly a robust release schedule after the strike and after the pandemic, and yet people still aren't coming back to theaters. And it's beginning to make me wonder whether they ever will, at least consistently, or if it's just going to be 2 to 4 months a year where the box office gets the bulk of its business and everything else, well, we'll just have to see what happens to it. We actually got very close this past weekend to having a box office total at around $50 million. We were at $51 million, and that actually inspired my Charts with Dan trivia question for this week. It's going to be very tough to nail. Maybe if you can just get it into the right range. The question is, prior to 2020, which was when theaters shut down for the COVID pandemic, when was the last time the domestic box office weekend total was at $50 million or less? What do you think? Was it 5 years? Was it 10? Was it 15? The last time before 2020, when theaters shut down, that the total domestic box office was at $50 million or less was the weekend of September 15th through the 17th, 1995, when the box office made $49.6 million, led by To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, Spike Lee's Clockers, and Dangerous Minds. So we were only within about $2 million of the unadjusted for inflation total domestic box office gross from 1995. That's not where we want to be. And people have cited all kinds of reasons, legitimate reasons, for not going back to theaters. And that's why I wanted to make my member question this week focused around why you, the viewer, are not going to the theater anymore. If you're not a member here on the channel, you can become one by pressing the button, depending on how you're watching it. There could be a button for you to press, or you can go down into the description below. There will be a way for you to join. But if you have decreased your theatrical movie going, I want to know why. So I've listed 4 reasons. The member question this week, what is the biggest reason why you see fewer movies in theaters? Is it that you're not interested in new releases? Is it the high ticket prices? Is it audience behavior? Or are you just waiting to watch at home? And these may all be reasons why you don't go, but I want to know the biggest reason why you don't go, because I want to take the temperature and see just what is keeping people out the most, or maybe I'll get this poll back and it's 25% for each option. That's why I do the polls. I want to see what the results are. Very quickly, last week's member poll was my last Oscar-related poll of this year, and it was about Best Actress winners who won the Academy Award on their first nomination. I asked which first nomination, first win Best Actress, was the most deserving of an Oscar. I'm actually surprised it was this much of a runaway. With 55%, Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once was your easy pick. I honestly thought it would be much more split between the 4. Olivia Colman in The Favorite, who honestly would have had my vote, came in second at 22%, followed by Brie Larson in Room at 16%, and Mikey Madison in Honora at just 8%. I was very surprised it was that low. I thought that she was very good. So let's break down some of the financials of the movies in the top 10. We've talked about Mickey 17. It had a pretty steep drop in its second weekend. So let's see at just what kind of damage Warner Brothers and the other investors in the film might be looking at. Let's look at a profitability breakdown for the movie. It's only made $1.4 million in China. That's about $280,000 back to the investors. It's made $89 million internationally. That's about $35.6 million according to my estimate, going back to the studio and investors. Its first week total was $25.7 million. That's $15.4 million back to investors, assuming a 60% cut. At 55% of the second weekend gross, that's another $4 million going back to the investors. Now, the budget is reported to be $118 million. The marketing cost was reported to be $80 million, so that's a $198 million investment. Its total worldwide gross so far is at $90.4 million. I net an estimated $55.4 million back to the studio against costs of $198 million. That's a theatrical shortfall of $142.5 million. So Warner Brothers and the other people that have a stake in this film are going to take a haircut on this one. It's going to be real tough for it to even break even when you include the ancillary markets. Maybe they'll be able to sell off some of the rights, although I would imagine it's probably going to go to Max, so that doesn't really help. Maybe it'll be popular on streaming, popular on physical media. But yeah, it's going to be a very long time before this movie turns a profit. Let's take a look now at Captain America: Brave New World, which is moving its way up the franchise tracker for the MCU. It's up to number 28 at $185.6 million. That is ahead of Captain America: The First Avenger, Ant-Man, Thor, and Black Widow, but it's somewhat behind by about $21 million. Thor: The Dark World. We'll see if it's got that much left in the tank. If so, it could maybe get up to right around the Ant-Man and the Wasp films. Looking at the franchise tracker adjusted for inflation, you see that Brave New World is still very low on the list. It's ahead of just the Marvels and Eternals. It is sneaking up on the Incredible Hulk to move up to number 32 there, but I think this kind of puts it even more in perspective. Just not a breakout hit, which I think is what Marvel and Disney were hoping for. There is some good news for one studio in town, and that is Neon. The latest push for Anora has now put it in the overall top 5 for the studio at $19.9 million. That bumps Ferrari down to number 6. They also released The Monkey this year. It's currently number 3 all time as far as the highest grossing domestic release for Neon. So, for a distributor, that's pretty good to put 2 of your all-time best films out within months of each other. They're working small. They market their movies effectively. They have good strategies as far as release goes, and it's paying off for them. So, hey, I'll be happy for at least one person in town. Let's move on from the domestic box office and see what the top films are outside of the US and Canada. These are the top 5 international films from the past weekend. At number 1, as it has been for a while, is Ne Zha 2 at just over $26 million. Mickey 17 comes in second at $15.6 million, followed by Captain America: Brave New World at $6 million. Bridget Jones: Mad About the Boy continuing to make bank at $5.6 million, and Black Bag, which opened to $4.2 million in international markets. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get our top 5 films worldwide, and Ne Zha 2 is back at number 1 with $26.4 million, a 43.5% drop from last weekend. It's now approaching $2.1 billion worldwide. Mickey 17 drops 47% worldwide for a $23.1 million weekend. As we mentioned, its worldwide total so far is about $90.4 million. Black Bag is in third place at $11.7 million. Captain America: Brave New World dropped about 35% for another $11.4 million. Its gross is approaching $400 million worldwide, and Novocaine rounds out the worldwide top 5 at $10.5 million. And when we talk about Ne Zha 2, it has now officially, by my numbers, become one of the top 5 grossing films of all time worldwide. It has passed Avengers: Infinity War and Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It is about $200 million, a little less than $200 million behind Titanic. I'm not sure if it gets there, but still a top 5 film that nobody really saw coming. That is pretty impressive. Keep in mind, though, it is still just now releasing in many markets worldwide, so it could actually have that $200 million left in it. We're just going to have to see what it does over the next several weeks. When we look at the franchise tracker for the MCU by worldwide gross, it is now at 31 out of 35. It's moved past the Marvels, The Incredible Hulk, Captain America the First Avenger, and Black Widow. Another $13 million or so is going to put it past Eternals, and then we'll see if it can move past Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. Remember, many people estimating the break-even for this film to be a minimum of $450 to $500 million. I don't think that it's going to get there. We've got a lot more numbers to go over, but before we do, I'm going to thank the sponsors for this week's show. This video is brought to you by Green Chef. Look, we're all looking to eat better, unless you're that rare person who can thrive on 4 pizzas a week, in which case I envy and salute you. But why stick to those short-lived fads when you can create new, healthy habits that last with Green Chef? Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for clean eating with pre-portioned and prepped quality food sent right to your door. I'm talking fresh produce, reasonably sourced proteins, and recipes designed by chefs to make you want to keep eating great. Plus, Green Chef has recipes curated for a variety of lifestyles and dietary needs. And this isn't just a box of stuff thrown together. The sauces are pre-made, the ingredients are pre-portioned, and your prep and mess are kept to a minimum so you can get to the best part, eating. My first box is arriving this week, and I'm super excited to try what's on the menu. Plus, I know that even though I'm a dummy when it comes to cooking, even I'll be able to follow the recipes with all the ingredients laid out for me. And if you don't have time to prep, that's not a problem. Green Chef also has salads that you can make in 5 minutes, smoothies ready to blend, and protein-filled breakfasts that you can grab and go. Thrive all year with clean, easy meals from Green Chef. Go to greenchef.com/danfree and use code DANFREE to get started with free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box. That's free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box at greenchef.com/danfree with the code DANFREE. Kick off your new meal plan today with Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. This video is brought to you by Warby Parker. I'm a man of culture. I enjoy a fine-looking pair of eyeglasses, but when I transitioned back to wearing them several years ago, it seemed like all the pairs I liked were either too expensive or didn't have the look I wanted. Warby Parker has changed all that, and I've been a happy customer of theirs for over 10 years. When you see my face on this channel, you see Warby Parker glasses, and that's the way I like it. They're comfortable, good quality, and perhaps most importantly, I can see out of them. Warby Parker uses premium materials in every frame, and it's super easy to shop for them. They have over 250 locations across the US and Canada, but they also offer a virtual try-on, which is how I bought my first pair. Glasses start at $95, which includes high-quality prescription lenses. I've never had one get scratched or had to replace one. And right now, you can save 15% when you buy 2 or more prescription pairs of glasses or sunglasses, either at home or in stores. All glasses come with free shipping and free 30-day returns. Get started with Warby Parker's virtual try-on. You can try on glasses and sunglasses, seeing the realistic color, texture, and size of each style right from home right now. Or head over to warbyparker.com/Murrell right now to take the home try-on quiz and pick 5 pairs of frames to try on at home for free. That's warbyparker.com/Murrell, warbyparker.com/Murrell. Before we move on to the specialty charts and the streaming charts, I actually wanted to return to a feature that I haven't done on the show for quite some time, and that is the Indie Theater Spotlight. For a while, I think about 1.5 or 2 years ago, every single week I used to feature an independent movie house somewhere in the country, sometimes outside of the USA, just because I think they deserve the attention, because they're doing the hard work out there. And there was one in particular that I wanted to spotlight this week, and that is the O Cinema, which is located in South Beach in Miami. The O Cinema opened in 2014, and it's hosted screenings of independent films in a variety of locations around Miami, and has also hosted several other organizations, including being a host theater for the Miami Jewish Film Festival, which that organization described as, quote, the largest Jewish film festival in the world. It's currently housed in South Beach in the old City Hall building, and that's actually what brought us to an interesting moment that I wanted to spotlight this week. O Cinema booked the film No Other Land, which was the winner of this year's Academy Award for Best Documentary, which, as we've talked about on the show, has not been picked up by a distributor. That movie is made by a team of Jewish and Palestinian filmmakers and provides a hard look at the displacement of residents in the Masafer Yatta area of the West Bank. On March 5th, prior to the film being screened, Miami Beach Mayor Stephen Miner sent a letter to the owner of the O Cinema saying that No Other Land was, quote, a one-sided propaganda attack, and asked the theater to reconsider the decision to show the film. After the theater did not cancel the screenings, Miner introduced a resolution proposing to terminate the lease of the theater, which is on property owned by the city, as well as eliminate $40,000 in grant money provided by the city to the theater. These grants were provided just last year after the state of Florida cut millions in public funding for the arts from the state budget. Now, Mayor Stephen Miner has said that he is a, quote, staunch advocate of free speech, but that he believes that No Other Land normalizes hate and cannot be tolerated, that it is contrary to the values of the city in which the O Cinema is located. But the people that run the cinema disagree with that assertion. O Cinema's co-founder and board of directors chair Kareem Tabsh told NPR, quote, the threats of closing a cinema down because some people do not like the films we show certainly sounds like censorship to me. Throughout the years, we've certainly had vocal audience members or community members who have questioned some programming choices, but what we have never encountered is elected officials trying to dictate what we should and should not be showing. The CEO of O Theaters, Vivian Martell, added, quote, our decision to screen No Other Land is not a declaration of political alignment. It is a bold affirmation of our fundamental belief that every voice deserves to be heard. The ability to present diverse perspectives without fear of political retribution is the cornerstone of a free and democratic society. Efforts to pressure or censor artistic expression set a dangerous precedent that threatens the creative and intellectual freedoms of all. Now, I've seen No Other Land, as I mentioned here on the show, and I don't believe that it's propaganda. I think that it is a very difficult look at a generational conflict, and more than anything, I think what the movie is calling for is an avenue to resolve that conflict. And what I think No Other Land does, and what a lot of other great documentaries do, is that it opens an avenue for discussion. A lot of times, those are hard discussions, difficult discussions to have, discussions that don't lead to easy solutions, but they're necessary. And I think that that is often the function of art, whether it's documentary or narrative filmmaking, in just about every society. Now, this isn't a done deal. The city commissioners are actually taking this up at a meeting tomorrow, so I will be staying tuned to see what they decide. But I think that should this go through, it sets a very dangerous precedent. The idea that if you are in any way affiliated with or get funding from the government, that you may now have to be careful of what you program lest you cross a state or federal or city official who doesn't agree with that, who could then pull your funding and put the independence of your independent theater at risk. And listen, there have been movies that have come out with political messages that I don't agree with, that I think aren't factual, that I think maybe even could cross that line into being propaganda. They have played at theaters that are in my hometown, independent theaters and chain theaters. And I can tell you, number one, I would never ask that those theaters not play those movies. I would never advocate for those theaters to be shut down. I would not support shutting down a theater that plays a movie that I don't agree with because of that precedent. If you set the precedent, then you could very easily find yourself in that situation again and again and again. And then you're entering into the realm of censorship. Absent a demonstrable case of public safety or public interest, I don't think that governments or city governments or government at any level should step in and do something like this. And I hope that the city commissioners agree and that this resolution is not passed. And I think it's important to support the concept that when you fund the arts, you are also funding free creative expression. If you want to support, in the meantime, O Cinema, by the way, their showings of No Other Land that are happening this week are reportedly sold out. You can do so by attending one of their other screenings, or you can make a donation at o-cinema.org/donate. All right, let's take a look now at the specialty charts for this past weekend, and we'll start with the per theater averages for the past weekend. At first place, bringing in about $16,000 in just one theater, is a movie called An Unfinished Film, which is a sort of narrative documentary about the challenges of filmmaking during the pandemic from Chinese director Liu Yi. In second place, bringing in almost $8,000 in one theater, is Elle, which is a 1953 film from Spanish surrealist director Luis Buñuel. It was remastered and released to mark, I believe, the 70th anniversary of its release here in the US. In third place is Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which brought in $3,000 in just one theater. It was an Oscar nominee this year, and it's still making the rounds. In fourth place is EFUS, which expanded to 30 theaters. It is a baseball hangout movie, as it credits itself, bringing in just over $2,800. And then in fifth place is one of the wide releases from this weekend, but it's actually Black Bag, which opened to a smaller theater count than Novocaine, and it brings in $2,812 for theater. Good enough for that number 5 spot. Looking at the top movies in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, at number 1 is the live stream of the Metropolitan Opera Fidelio in an unknown number of theaters. It brought in about $865,000. In second is a film from India, a Telugu language film called Court, State versus a Nobody, which brought in just over $619,000 in an unknown number of theaters. It's about a lawyer defending a young man wrongfully accused. In third place is the documentary October 8, which played in 127 theaters and brought in $234,000. It's a movie about the rise of anti-Israel sentiment in America following the attacks of October 8th. Some of the same claims that I've heard about No Other Land, I've also seen about this film. So far, I have seen no calls to shut down any of the theaters showing it, nor, might I add, should there be any such calls. At number 4 is I'm Still Here, which is still kicking in 163 theaters. It brought in just over $121,000. And at number 5 is EFUS. In those 30 theaters, it brought in $85,678 in total. This is a look at the 2025 annual domestic box office. These are movies released in 2025. Captain America Brave New World remains number 1 at $185.6 million. Dogman is at number 2, followed by One of Them Days, Paddington in Peru, and Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. The Monkey is at number 6. Mickey 17 enters the chart at number 7 with $33.2 million. Hard Eyes falls down 1 spot to number 8. Flight Risk moves down to number 9. Companion moves down to number 10. And Wolfman is officially out of the 2025 domestic top 10. Looking at the 10 highest grossing movies of the year worldwide, Ne Zha 2, of course, an easy number 1 at just over $2 billion, followed by Detective Chinatown 1900. It's at just under $500 million. Captain America Brave New World is in third place. Another Chinese film, Creation of the Gods 2, is in fourth place at $172.4 million. Dogman is in fifth at $125.8 million, but right behind it is Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy, at $120.6 million, despite no U.S. theatrical release. Boonie Bears Future Reborn is in 7th, followed by Legends of the Condor in 8th. Mickey 17 enters the charts at number 9 with $90.4 million. The Indian film Chava moves down to number 10, and Den of Thieves 2 Pantera is off the top 10 list. So that's all the box office data that I have. Before we go, I want to take a look at the world of streaming, and we will start with the latest numbers from Netflix, which cover the week of February 24th to March 2nd. We're going to get some new numbers today. At number 1 was Counterattack, which had a very strong second week on the charts, 22.1 million views for that film. In second place was Plankton the Movie at 14.32 million views. Running Point Season 1 had a good second week. It brought in 12.2 million views for the entire series, followed by Squad 36 in 4th and Demon City in 5th place. Despicable Me 4 stays on the chart at number 6. 0 Day still hanging around at number 7 with 7.5 million views. New entries on the chart include Medusa Season 1 at number 8. This is a series from Colombia about a CEO whose life is in danger. At number 9 is the Netflix film Delicious, which brought in 6.47 million views. It's a German film about a family who takes on a new maid with sinister consequences. And the new Errol Morris documentary, Chaos, following the Charles Manson case, comes in 10th place at just over 5 million views. Looking at the most watched movies on Netflix in 2025, Back in Action is an easy number 1 at 130.8 million views, but Counterattack is already at number 5 with 40 million views. It should easily pass Kinda Pregnant and The Secret Life of Pets 2 in the next week or so. Carry On moves down to number 6, that's carryover from 2024, followed by Luca's World, Despicable Me 2, and Despicable Me 3, The Secret Life of Pets is off of the top 10 list for this year. And looking at the most watched shows on Netflix in 2025, Squid Game Season 2 at 126 million views. American Murder, Gabby Petito is at number 2 at 46.74 million views. Missing You is at number 3. 0 Day moving up the charts at number 4, 44.5 million views. The Night Agent Season 2 is down to number 5. At number 6 is American Primeval, followed by Squid Game Season 1, Cassandra moving up 1 spot to number 8, Exo Kitty moving down 1 spot to number 9, and The Trauma Code Season 1 at number 10. And looking at the overall most watched programs of 2025, Back in Action now has the lead at 130.89, followed by Squid Game Season 2 at 126 million, Everything else is pretty far behind. We will have to see what kind of numbers the Electric State does with its debut over the next week, and then what it does in the weeks after to see if it's going to hit this chart. Counterattack debuting on the overall top 10, bumping out La Dolce Villa. And while I was crunching all those other numbers, I failed to mention that Carry On has now become the third most viewed Netflix movie of all time, and it is very close to passing Don't Look Up. We'll see if it's able to put on another week or so on the charts to get up to that number, but I wanted to make sure I made a note of that. It is now the sixth most watched program since Netflix started reporting numbers back in June of 2021, so really an unexpected all-time hit for Netflix there. Let's take a look now at the Nielsen ratings. Now, these are just domestic numbers as opposed to the global numbers we get from Netflix, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes for Nielsen to get us this data. So this is for the week of February 10th through the 16th. Looking at the most watched streaming movies, Aftermath is at number 1 with 11.1 million hours watched, with La Dolce Villa debuting in second place, and The Gorge on Apple TV Plus putting up pretty good numbers, especially for Apple TV on the Nielsen charts at 6.7 million hours watched. Kinda Pregnant's at number 4, Trial by Fire debuts at number 5, You're Cordially Invited falls to number 6, Back in Action still in the top 10 at number 7, Sing is at number 8, Uncle Drew is at number 9. I used my movie pass to see that movie, so that one's been hanging around for a while. And the Super Mario Brothers movie on Peacock rounds out the top 10. When we look at the most watched streaming movies for the year so far, this is through February 16th, Back in Action easily at number 1 at 66.2 million hours watched. You're Cordially Invited is at number 2. Rare to see Amazon Prime Video up that high at 26.9 million. Horizon Chapter 1 is in third. Kinda Pregnant is in fourth. Moana, perennially hanging around, is in fifth place. Despicable Me 2, The Wild Robot, and Furiosa, a Mad Max saga kick off the top 10, and Despicable Me and In the Heart of the Sea round out the top 10. Let's look at the most watched streaming shows for February 10th through the 16th. Sweet Magnolias was at number 1, followed by Cobra Kai returning to the chart at number 2. I believe this was the last batch of episodes. It's lost a little bit of luster with this extended rollout of its final season, but it's still good for a top 10 show, 18.9 million hours watched. Bluey's in third place. Love is Blind returns to the chart at fourth place at 17.8 million hours watched, followed by The Night Agent, Grey's Anatomy, NCIS, The Big Bang Theory, Bob's Burgers, and Resident Alien making a debut in the top 10 at 11.95 million hours watched. When we look at the top 20 shows as far as watch time per available episode, the hours watched by the number of episodes that you could watch, Paradise on Hulu remains a strong performer at 1.62 million hours watched per episode. Apple Cider Vinegar on Netflix is just behind at 1.61 million hours per episode. Cassandra's at 1.29 million. Severance continues to do well. Its hours per episode numbers are going up as more episodes are coming out. Usually that waters the number down, but obviously more people tuning into the show. I believe it comes to an end this week. It brought in 810,000 hours watched per episode. The Night Agent is in fifth place. The Recruit is in sixth. Sweet Magnolias is in seventh. Invincible is in eighth. Resident Alien is at ninth. And Cobra Kai, with 65 episodes now available, rounds out the top 10 at 291,000 hours watched per episode. Looking at the most watched series of the year so far through February 16th, Bluey, not surprisingly, holds the number 1 spot at 131.6 million hours watched. Overall, it's the third most watched streaming series according to Nielsen of the year. Bob's Burgers is in second, Grey's Anatomy's in third, Family Guy's in fourth, Younger drops down to number 5, The Big Bang Theory moves up to number 6, Dexter moves down to number 7, then we have NCIS at number 8, The Rookie at number 9, and Law & Order SVU hitting number 10. These are many of the usual suspects. Looking at the most watched original streaming series of the year through February 16th, Squid Game right now is the overall most watched show of 2025 through mid-February at 166.1 million hours watched. It will eventually get passed by Bluey and the other shows that are on this chart every week, but right now it's number 1. The Night Agent's actually number 2. Landman is the third most watched original streaming series and 7th most watched overall for the year, followed by American Primeval and Virgin River. Severance moves up to the 6th most watched original streaming series at 50.5 million hours watched, easily more successful than the first season. The Recruit is at number 7. Beast Games moves down to number 8. Sweet Magnolias enters the chart at number 9. And The Traitors drops down to number 10. And that's all I've got for you this week. Before we go, though, I want to point out some things that you might want to watch at home and in theaters this upcoming week. First of all, now streaming on Hulu is the Best Picture winner, Anora. So if you didn't get out to see it in theaters, you can now watch it at home if you have Hulu. Today, we have a couple of movies that are hitting premium video on demand, those higher priced rentals. One of them is Last Breath, which is currently still in the top 10. The other is My Dead Friend Zoe, which we saw, I believe, on the specialty charts just a couple weeks ago. Then on Wednesday, there's a special theatrical engagement. If you can find a theater near you that's playing it, no one near me is playing it, and I'm very upset. Hans Zimmer and Friends, Diamond in the Desert, which features live performances of some of Hans Zimmer's most famous music, along with interviews between Hans Zimmer and some of his collaborators. Also on Wednesday, Spring Breakers is the latest A24 release to get a one-night IMAX event. So if you want to see Scuzzy James Franco on IMAX, this Wednesday's your chance. On Thursday, Rad Day 2025 will be hitting theaters in wide release. It features a restoration of the 1986 BMX film Rad, along with the world premiere of a new documentary called A Rad Documentary. On Netflix Thursday is the debut of The Residents, a limited series about a murder mystery set in the White House, featuring an ensemble cast starring Uzo Aduba, Randall Park, Andre Braugher, Jason Lee, and Giancarlo Esposito.
Hello, my name is Giancarlo Esposito.
Also debuting Thursday on Amazon Prime Video is Tyler Perry's latest film, Duplicity, about a lawyer who tries to solve the murder of someone close to her. And streaming on Netflix Thursday is Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. Then on Friday, the major new release is Disney's live-action remake of Snow White. It has seemed like a slow death crawl to the release of this film, and I will have my review at the embargo. I'm going to hit the road to see it early. I'll let you know what I think of it when it drops on Wednesday. Also in wide release this theaters is The Alto Knights, which was reportedly a pet project of David Zaslav's at Warner Brothers. Robert De Niro plays two competing crime bosses in a double starring role. He plays both leads. The movie's from Nicholas Pileggi, the writer of Goodfellas, and is directed by Barry Levinson. In many theaters around the country this weekend is a new movie called Locked from the director of Brightburn. Bill Skarsgård plays a car thief who finds himself locked in a custom thief trap car controlled by Anthony Hopkins, and he has to fight to survive in his glass case of emotion. Also in many theaters nationwide is Ash. Eiza Gonzalez plays the last survivor of a mysterious space station massacre, and Aaron Paul plays the astronaut sent to rescue her. The movie comes from director Flying Lotus. In limited release, speaking of a slow crawl to getting in theaters, is Magazine Dreams, which finally opens this weekend. After a Sundance premiere 2 years ago, what looked to be a major awards contender for Jonathan Majors was derailed by his legal problems. Briarcliff picked the movie up for distribution after it was dropped by Searchlight. Majors plays a deeply troubled bodybuilder, and I can tell you I saw it when it played Sundance. It is a tough watch. He is very good in it, but as always, you're just going to have to weigh whether you want to check it out or not. Also in limited release this weekend is Secret Mall Apartment. It's a look back at a group of artists in Providence, Rhode Island, who made a secret apartment inside of an unused portion of a large shopping mall. As I mentioned before, also on Friday is the season 2 finale of Severance on Apple TV+. And if you haven't seen Wicked, or you only saw it in theaters, or you've only seen it in theaters and on Blu-ray, it is hitting streaming this Friday on Peacock, along with the sing-along version. Apparently, it's trying to reach full market saturation. And that's all I've got for you this week. I have no more left. As always, be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. I'm going to have my review of Snow White tomorrow, as well as more stuff. I might try to check out Alto Knights and keep my ear to the ground on the news, see what's going on with O Cinema. There's lots of stuff that I want to talk to you about. Thanks, of course, for watching this episode. Please be sure to check out the description below for more about our sponsors, and be sure to come back next time. Until then, though, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.